Facebook is taking on software that shuts out advertisements.
The changes are designed to give people more control.
Nur wenige mit Facebook in Verbindung.
Non encantará Facebook porque de ahí viene.
Social media companies fighting to outblock the blocker.
The block or not the block?
Changes to the newsfeed would make content and ads indistinguishable.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week. The battle over ad blockers, those apps that spare you from seeing advertisements online that major media companies like Facebook call an existential threat to their business. Another week and another newspaper bites the dust in Turkey.
O Jornal Nacional está começando.
Brazilian media giant Globo, its history, its politics, and its power to influence the national agenda. And after the Olympics, what becomes of those shiny new venues? The answer is not much. We begin our program with a story about a media arms race over technology and advertising. Last week, Facebook reinforced just how important advertising is to its business when it served up ads in its news feed that ad blockers were powerless to intercept. Within 2 days, the open source ad blocking community blocked Facebook's new ads, only for Facebook to respond by blocking the ad blockers. Watching all of this from a slight distance, but with a huge stake in the outcome, are content providers, many of them news outlets, who have seen online platforms such as Facebook rob them of ad revenues while at the same time relying on them for the revenues that do keep trickling in. And it doesn't stop there. News outlets that allow Facebook to host their content are still powerless if Facebook decides to adjust its algorithms. With newsrooms shrinking and alternative revenue models at best experimental, traditional news outlets are playing a numbers game whose rules are being kept under wraps. Our starting point this week is Facebook's headquarters, Menlo Park, California. For the hundreds of millions of people around the world who use ad blockers, Tuesday, August 9th was different. On that day, there were ads aplenty on Facebook's news feeds. That was the day the site rolled out its block on the ad blockers, exposing users to ads those users did not want to see. For ad blockers, the companies that make the software, and the people who use them, Facebook was committing a commercial act of war, and they struck back quickly.
Last Tuesday, they introduced something into their code that would circumvent ad blocking. Well, by Thursday, we had introduced something that worked around that. It goes back and forth.
Facebook quickly reacted by finding a way to block the circumvention code. And this is what usually happens in the kind of cat and mouse game of ad blockers and publishers.
Friday morning, we found another workaround. Friday afternoon, they found another workaround, and then finally Friday afternoon, we found a final workaround, and they were able to work around that. Where we stand right now is Facebook currently is not allowing users to use ad blockers, but we are confident that the open source community that supports Adblock Plus will find a solution soon.
Facebook's block on ad blockers was announced less than a month after it issued an earnings report that was better than expected. The company reported $6.4 billion in revenues in the last quarter, 97% of which came from advertising. The vast majority of ad revenues, 85%, came from mobile users, most of whom access Facebook through phone apps, for which ad blockers have yet to be developed. So Facebook's anti-ad blocking initiative is aimed at protecting ad money coming in through web users on desktops. It also sends a message to publishers, content providers, that their ad revenues are safe on Facebook.
One lesson that publishers have learned in this digital world is that they can't monetize their content in the way that they used to. All of those revenue streams from different types of technology and services are really marginal compared to advertising. So they are dependent on advertising, and that's really the background to the struggle that we see.
The face-off between an advertiser, a distributor, and a creator. That face-off has happened hundreds of years ago in newspapers, it happened in television, it's happened in radio, it's currently happening on social media platforms. But the endpoint always has to be that if content has to be created, it has a cost. Now, if you're a person who's got huge objections to seeing ads, then the only thing I can say to you is that if you still want to consume my content, you have to pay for it.
Facebook dressed up its new anti-ad blocking policy by talking up the Facebook experience and the site's mission of giving people the power to make the world more open and connected. The statement barely made mention of revenues, except to say the new policy would protect the funding needed to support the journalism and other free services we enjoy on the web. Facebook also took a swipe at the ad blockers and the way they make their money through something called whitelisting. The German company behind Adblock Plus allows certain kinds of ads, smaller, unobtrusive ones, to be seen. And it gives smaller websites a break, letting their ads go unblocked. However, major websites must pay a fee to Adblock Plus if they want their ads to be seen and their site to be whitelisted. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are all on Adblock Plus's whitelist. They paid to get there.
Only the top 10%, the really big players, pay, and they pay for the service that we're providing them. And when you don't give users complete choice, users are going to try to find a way to take that choice back. Users download ad blockers because they want to be in the driver's seat, and we feel the internet works in such a way that users should be in that driver's seat.
Let's realize that the end game is the same for everybody. There is a creator, there is a platform, there is a consumer. And everyone in the value chain has to be viable. Clearly today, Facebook is a very powerful platform. 1 billion people log in every day. Now you can't argue with that power. If I have that kind of an audience base, I will exercise that power.
Facebook's clout is undeniable and in many ways immeasurable. Looming larger than the ad blocker issue, though, is the reliance news providers now have on the site and its 1.7 billion users. The Instant Articles feature and Facebook Live are both designed to get more and more media outlets to have their content hosted on Facebook's servers. The influence that this one platform now has on how media outlets operate and what they see as news seems to grow by the day.
Every single publisher, every single editor has to be mindful of what their content will look like on social media and optimize that content in order for it to be shared and to be disseminated far further than their site would reach alone. So that can present some issues journalistically. Are you producing content because it will suit the medium as opposed to telling the stories that people really need to know?
So then the question becomes, well, what kinds of news are being potentially put at risk in this new ecosystem? Long-form investigative news, more complex stories that are not easily and instantly digestible by users and therefore don't generate those numbers. The kinds of news that hold local centres of power to account are in many ways the vanguards of the fourth estate, and we need to be really worried about the pressures that this new news economics is placing on them.
And that is where news is going, whether journalists like it or not. On the download now, our viewers on ad blockers and their impact on the news business.
It might be tempting for journalists to see Facebook as a savior of sorts. Put your content here and the ads can't be blocked. Just remember, Facebook doesn't care what the content is. They care about capturing attention and monetizing it. If your journalism doesn't do as well as cat videos, conspiracy theories, and baby photos, Facebook will dump you. Just ask any publication that spent time building up a page with millions of fans, only to see engagement drop to nothing after an algorithm change.
Facebook has been doing a better job at providing tools for monetization. I understand that instant articles have been very successful for both users and publisher revenue. But of course, at the end of the day, they're working for their own best interests. I don't think Facebook has robbed news outlets of revenue, though. Facebook has created a lot of extra traffic to publishers that didn't exist before, and many have become addicted to that traffic. Spending on the expectation of social media traffic has created great opportunities and innovation in the media world, but in some ways it was a mistake to build a business plan around an external platform that didn't really promise publishers anything.
We're always looking to hear from our viewers. If you've got an opinion on the news media, just follow our Facebook or Twitter page to find out what stories we're working on next. Our Twitter handle is @AJListeningPost. Then fire up your camera, make a worthwhile point about the coverage. Hit send, and we'll see you on the download. Other stories that are on our radar this week. The media story in Turkey just keeps getting bigger. This past week, another newspaper was shut down. One of the country's best-known editors resigned, and numerous Twitter accounts have been blocked. Authorities raided the Istanbul offices of the pro-Kurdish daily Özgür Gündem. They arrested at least 17 journalists. A court ordered the paper to shut down for allegedly spreading terrorist propaganda and acting as the de facto news outlet of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, which Ankara calls a terrorist organization. A journalist and a cameraman with IMC TV who were reporting live on the raid were also arrested. At another newspaper, the Turkish daily Cumhuriyet, editor Can Dündar has stepped down. He is currently in self-imposed exile, believed to be somewhere in Germany, and says he will not return until the state of emergency in Turkey is lifted. Dündar and the paper's Ankara bureau chief Erdem Gül both face 5 years in jail for their reporting in a case that's headed for appeal. On the social media side, Twitter receives a higher number of what it calls takedown requests from Ankara than any other government. This past week, Twitter was told to make another 30 accounts inaccessible in Turkey, most of them affiliated with Zaman, an opposition media group with ties to Fethullah Gulen, the US-based cleric whose followers are being held responsible for the failed coup last month. Zaman was Turkey's best-selling newspaper when it was taken over 5 months ago and turned into a pro-government outlet. Journalists in India who recently published an expose on a political group with close ties to the country's ruling party have found themselves exposed and are now under investigation. Outlook, a weekly news magazine, published an 11,000-word piece last month on what the magazine called a human trafficking story involving affiliates of the RSS, India's largest Hindu nationalist political organization. The magazine and the journalist who wrote the story, Neha Dixit, then became the targets of a criminal complaint filed by members of the ruling party, the BJP, which is politically linked to the RSS. They are accused of allegedly spreading communal hatred because of a reference to ethnic conflicts in their report. Outlook's editor-in-chief, Krishna Prasad, was then fired, although the magazine insists his departure was unrelated to the RSS story. Gawker, the New York-based news site known for its clickbait journalism and its scandal sheet style, is being shut down by its new owner. Gawker's parent company has been bought by Univision, the biggest bilingual media company in the U.S., for $135 million at a bankruptcy auction. 6 other websites previously owned by Gawker will remain in business. Gawker.com staff will reportedly keep their jobs. Gawker and its founder, Nick Denton, had to file for bankruptcy after being sued for $140 million. Former wrestler Hulk Hogan took Gawker to court over privacy matters, a case that was financially backed in secret by Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. Some saw it as a personal vendetta by Thiel. Back in 2007, Gawker exposed Thiel's sexuality before he openly came out as gay. Press freedom advocates have called the case a dangerous precedent in that a billionaire bankrupted a news organization through a lawsuit. In an op-ed in the New York Times, Thiel said he's just fighting to protect privacy and that, quote, the press is too important to let its role be undermined by those who would search for clicks at the cost of the profession's reputation. As the Olympics come to an end in Rio, it will be a return to business as usual in Brazil, which means politics as usual as well, as the Senate holds its final vote on the impeachment of the country's suspended president, Dilma Rousseff. Rousseff is caught up in a huge oil corruption scandal known as Operation Car Wash. She herself is not under investigation, although many of the MPs trying to oust her are. Supporters of Rousseff's Workers' Party, the PT, are calling this a soft coup, and many say that part of the blame lies with the country's conservative news media. They're talking about a company called Rede Globo, the biggest media conglomerate in Latin America. Owned by the richest family in Brazil, the Marinhos, Globo TV gets ratings that other broadcasters would kill for. Every night, about 50 million Brazilians tune into Globo's flagship newscast, Jornal Nacional. And Globo didn't just cover the protests over Operation Car Wash. In some instances, it called on viewers to join them. Historically, Globo has not been shy with its opinions. Back in 1964, it supported a military coup, and the network has since apologized for the cozy relationship it had with the junta over the following 2 decades. 13 years ago, when the PT took power, it chose not to reform the media and clearly thought that it could tame Globo in other ways. On that, the PT has been proven wrong. The Listening Post's Paolo Ganino now from Rio de Janeiro on the Brazilian media behemoth known as Rede Globo.
For Brazilians, 7 p.m. is TV time. This is Globo's magic programming slot. 3 straight hours of the country's top TV novelas.
Boa noite.
Boa noite. With the nation's most watched news hour, Jornal Nacional, right in between. Elsewhere, TV news might be in crisis, but in Brazil, more than 70% of the population get the entirety of their news, all of it from television. And Globo is the largest network in the country.
Globo is the first and most powerful power in this country. It's more important than the parties, the church. The editor-in-chief for the evening news of Globo is the most powerful politician in this country.
That Jornal Nacional, it's so influential, it can just change the entire view of the country. Just one night only, you can change the entire course of the debate in the country.
É a fonte de informação das pessoas.
It's the go-to source of information, with news that shapes the way people think.
O Jornal Nacional está começando.
Creating a version of reality that people end up accepting as the truth. It's the production of a hegemony of thought, of an interpretation of the facts which presents itself as the truth.
Acaba aceitando que aquilo é verdade.
There's a saying in Brazilian politics which goes like this. If Globo's evening news didn't show it, it didn't happen.
In the past 2 years, the corruption scandal known as Operation Car Wash has left Brazil in a political crisis. Millions of Brazilians took to the streets. Some in support of President Dilma Rousseff, who, although not directly under investigation, has been suspended, while others were demanding her impeachment. Globo seemed to take sides.
Globo was not just covering the protest.
Muitos estão chegando ainda.
They would go there, they would say, you can still come. Everybody's gathering around here now.
Muita gente chegando pelas estações de metrô.
A Rede Globo interrompeu a sua
Globo interrupted its regular transmission to present the call as if you were going for a picnic, a day out.
Dá tempinho na cobertura do esporte. Vamos falar das manifestações que acontecem pelo país.
Like, come down to protest against corruption, against the government. And it was an important factor for the middle classes, who are incensed at having lost their privileges, to mobilize in one of the biggest protests ever.
This big channel has also the biggest newspaper and has also lots of radios. Journalism should be against power, against status quo, against the establishment. And Globo has always had this promiscuous relation with power since the beginning.
In 1964, Globo openly endorsed a military coup and went on to establish itself as the dominant media company in Brazil. 20 years later, 1 year before the military handed power back to civilians, 300,000 people gathered in São Paulo calling for the end of military rule.
Dia de festa em São Paulo. A cidade comemorou.
On Jornal Nacional, audiences were told that the protesters were celebrating the city's anniversary. In 1989, Brazil finally held its first direct presidential election in almost 30 years. Jornal Nacional backed the conservative candidate Fernando Collor, skewing the debate heavily in his favor.
Ao transmitir o encontro dos presidenciáveis, a televisão cumpriu mais uma vez o seu papel na democracia.
Then, 2013, protests erupted over the economy and corruption. Globo was one of the demonstrators' targets, and the network finally apologized for its support of the coup. An apology that felt tactical.
O reconhecimento de erros, como o apoio editorial ao golpe militar de 1964.
E nesse momento de questionamento,
at this critical point, Globo was trying to appear more impartial, to say we are not just defending the neoliberal order, the establishment, the elites. We want to be more inclusive, so we are revising our previous position. Well, that was kind of an empty gesture. PR, really.
Globo doesn't seem to like the scrutiny that comes with being Latin America's largest media conglomerate, and as a former Brazilian president put it, one of the country's power institutions. We contacted them repeatedly asking for an interview for this report, but no one was put forward. Some of the journalists we approached directly told us they'd be fired if they talked to us on the record.
Globo is a national network, but they say all politics is local, and across Brazil, Globo's affiliates wield influence.
The regional news coverage in Brazil is a lot worse than the national news coverage, which is already bad. The thing is, the affiliates from Globo were always owned by politicians.
1/3 of the Brazilian Congress holds shares in the TV stations or radio stations in their regions which transmit their propaganda. They are regional oligarchs who control information because they own the affiliates of Rede Globo, the local newspapers, the local radio stations. You will not hear a word of criticism against the local governors because the radio stations belong to them.
As rádios são propriedade deles.
In Brazil, lots of things that are obvious in the world are not here, like separation between church and state. We didn't have that. We didn't have also separation between press and government.
In 2002, Lula da Silva, leader of the Workers' Party PT, won Brazil's presidential elections, marking a leftward-turning government. But, unlike other leftist leaders around Latin America, who focus on dismantling mega-conglomerates, including those in the media, neither Lula nor his successor Dilma Rousseff took on Globo and its dominance.
The biggest advertiser in Brazil is the government. When Lula got elected in 2002, he could put all the advertising money in a good national TV, public, just like France or England. He didn't. He thought Globo would work for PT, just as Globo worked for previous governments. But Globo didn't.
They were and are afraid of Globo. They didn't challenge Globo. And that is Lula and Dilma's biggest mistake. They saw it coming, but they couldn't react. They built their own demise.
Those leftist leaders may have felt that Globo was too big to reform, or that they could use the office of the president to bring the network under control. Now Brazil has an interim government, a conservative one. If the Senate votes to impeach Rousseff, that government might be in power until 2018. Its story will be told, probably without apology this time, on Jornal Nacional. And Brazilians, in their tens of millions, will be watching.
Finally, with the Rio Olympics coming to an end, the athletes, fans, and the global media will pack up and head for home. But the stadia, the tracks, the courses, the fields that were either purpose-built or upgraded to host the games, they aren't going anywhere. Once the flame moves on, host countries are often left with venues they don't know what to do with, that they've just spent billions on. And Olympic villages that were once so full of life turn into ghost towns. We leave you now with a look at some of the abandoned Olympic venues of games gone by. And we'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.